Imagine walking through a crowded street in New York, London, or Tokyo, but among the sea of faces, some look different. Heavier brows, wider noses, stockier builds. Not masks, not costumes, but real living people, descendants of another branch of humanity. What if, alongside us, there were still Neanderthals? This is not a science fiction question. For nearly 400,000 years, Neanderthals thrived across Ice Age Europe and Western Asia. They hunted mammoths, painted caves, crafted tools, and even buried their dead long before modern humans spread across the globe. Yet, around 40,000 years ago, they vanished, leaving only fragments of bone, traces of DNA, and mysteries that haunt archaeology. But what if history had taken a different turn? What if Neanderthals had survived? Would they live among us, as part of our societies, voting in our elections, working in our offices? Or would they remain separate, a parallel humanity, shaping their own civilizations, building their own myths, perhaps even rivaling us in power? The survival of Neanderthals would have changed the story of human evolution forever. We often tell history as though we, Homo sapiens, were destined to rule the Earth, but the truth is far less certain. For most of prehistory, we were not alone. We shared the world with cousins, the Denisovans, the hobbits of Flores, and above all, the Neanderthals, being so close to us that some scientists argue they were not a different species at all, but simply another form of human. In this video, we will explore the haunting question: what if Neanderthals had never gone extinct? Through archaeology, genetics, and bold imagination, we'll uncover what life might look like today if another kind of human still walked beside us, prepared to step back into the Ice Age and forward into an alternate present. To understand what the survival of Neanderthals might mean for us today, we first need to know who they were and how they lived. Neanderthals emerged around 400,000 years ago, likely evolving from an earlier ancestor, Homo heidelbergensis. Their world was brutal. Sweeping glaciers advanced and retreated across Europe during the Ice Age, forcing all living creatures to adapt or perish. And adapt they did. Neanderthals were not the primitive brutes once imagined. Archaeology has steadily revealed a portrait of resilience, intelligence, and even creativity. In 1856, in Germany's Neander Valley, from which they take their name, workers uncovered fossilized bones that seemed both human and alien. The skull was thicker, with a sloping forehead and massive brow ridges. Over the next century, more discoveries followed, from La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France to Shonadar Cave in Iraq to the frozen plains of Siberia. These skeletons showed us a people shorter and stockier than modern humans, built like wrestlers to withstand the cold, with lungs and noses adapted to icy air. They were also tool makers. At sites like Mousterian workshops, stone blades and scrapers demonstrate precision and planning. Charred bones reveal controlled use of fire, and in caves such as El Castillo in Spain, red ochre handprints suggest that Neanderthals, like us, may have reached for symbolic expression, the beginnings of art. Perhaps most haunting of all are the burials. In Shonadar Cave, archaeologists found skeletons dusted with pollen, evidence that flowers may have been placed with the dead. If true, it means Neanderthals not only cared for their sick, but mourned their passing. They were not mindless beasts, but thinking, feeling humans. And yet, around 40,000 years ago, they disappeared. The reasons remain hotly debated. Some scholars argue that competition with incoming Homo sapiens, armed with new hunting strategies and wider social networks, pushed Neanderthals aside. Others suggest climate instability fractured their populations, and still others propose interbreeding, that rather than vanishing, Neanderthals live on inside us. Indeed, genetic studies prove that most people outside of Africa carry 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. In that sense, they are not gone at all. But the thought experiment remains. What if they had fully survived, not just as echoes in our genes, but as neighbors, friends, even rivals? Would Homo sapiens still have dominated the globe? Or would history be a tale of two humanities, parallel civilizations, competing, trading, perhaps warring? The question is not mere fantasy.
Throughout prehistory, multiple human species coexisted. In the Denisova cave in Siberia, a single finger bone revealed the Denisovans, a mysterious people known only through DNA. On the island of Flores, Indonesia, skeletons of the so-called hobbits, Homo florensis, show that tiny humans lived until at least 50,000 years ago. Our evolutionary story has never been solitary. For most of our existence, we shared the Earth. If Neanderthals had endured the last ice age and survived into the modern world, everything, from our science to our culture to our sense of identity, would look profoundly different. And that is the journey we are about to take.
Picture an ice age dawn. The wind slices across a frozen valley in what is now France. A small band of Neanderthals huddles around a fire, their stocky frames silhouetted against the snow. They carry spears tipped with sharpened flint, eyes scanning the horizon for mammoth, bison, or reindeer. This was their world. Harsh, perilous, but one they mastered for hundreds of thousands of years. Now, imagine that band never vanished. Imagine their descendants sitting across from us today. What would that mean? The first thing to understand is that Neanderthals were not as alien as once thought. Their brains were, on average, slightly larger than ours. Different in shape, yes, more elongated with a prominent occipital bun at the back, but packed with neurons. If Homo sapiens were the strategists, Neanderthals were the engineers. Their tools, known as Mousterian technology, were meticulously crafted. Each flake struck from stone was calculated. Had they survived, perhaps our industrial revolutions would have begun earlier or developed differently, shaped by two ways of thinking working side by side. But would we have accepted them? Here lies the deeper question. History shows how poorly Homo sapiens treat even minor differences among ourselves: race, language, culture. How would we react to a people with visibly different skulls and builds? Would Neanderthals be given citizenship, rights, and dignity? Or would they be marginalized, cast as others, subject to prejudice far deeper than anything in modern history? Anthropologists suggest Neanderthals were highly social, living in close-knit groups where cooperation ensured survival. Their skeletons reveal injuries healed over many years, proof that the weak and wounded were cared for. In a modern setting, perhaps they would excel in communal societies, emphasizing collective good over individual gain. Could their presence have steered human civilization away from hyper-individualism and toward deeper cooperation? And then there is language. This remains one of the great debates. Did Neanderthals truly speak? The discovery of the hyoid bone, a small bone in the throat linked to speech, suggests they may have. If they did, their voices might have sounded different, deeper, more resonant, perhaps carrying across icy plains. In a world where Neanderthals survived, would we today hear two human languages spoken side by side? Sapiens and Neanderthal, mingling into shared dialects, new forms of poetry, even joint mythologies? Consider also the impact on art and culture. Cave paintings in Spain, dated to more than 64,000 years ago, suggest Neanderthals might have been the first artists, predating modern humans in Europe. If true, then the story of art, of human imagination itself, belongs as much to them as to us. Would the Louvre or the Metropolitan Museum today hold galleries devoted not just to Van Gogh and Da Vinci, but to Neanderthal traditions, their carvings, pigments, and symbolic creations? The survival of Neanderthals would not just alter history, it would alter identity. Homo sapiens like to see ourselves as unique, chosen, the pinnacle of evolution. Sharing the planet with another intelligent human species would shatter that illusion. It would remind us that intelligence is not a singular crown, but a branching tree. So what would this alternate present look like? Would Neanderthals work alongside us in universities, studying the very fossils of their ancestors? Would they have nations, flags, and governments? Or would they, like history often repeats, be confined to the margins,
and reservations, studied like relics instead of embraced as kin? The answers lie not just in fossils, but in the imagination. To envision Neanderthals alive today is to confront both the potential of humanity and its deepest prejudices.
If Neanderthals had survived, the story of humanity would not be a single line marching toward modern civilization. It would be a branching path full of rivalry, exchange, and uneasy coexistence. Let us pause and imagine the first great civilizations: Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley. Their temples rose, their scripts emerged, their kings declared themselves chosen by the gods. But what if Neanderthal voices had joined this chorus? Would there have been Neanderthal dynasties along the Nile? Neanderthal scribes inscribing clay tablets? Neanderthal artisans shaping the statues of kings? Or would the divide between us have remained? A world where Homo sapiens built empires while Neanderthals lingered in the peripheries, hunters and gatherers watching cities rise without them. This question is not easy to answer because even scientists disagree about Neanderthal capacities. Some archaeologists emphasize their sophistication. Evidence of pigments, beads, and symbolic carvings suggest Neanderthals had the spark of imagination. Others caution against over-romanticizing them, pointing out that their toolkits remained relatively unchanged for long spans of time, unlike the rapid innovation of Homo sapiens. Was this stability a weakness, or simply another way of living, valuing continuity over constant change? There are also genetic debates. Modern DNA analysis shows that interbreeding did happen. Today, the average person of European or Asian ancestry carries between 1 and 2% Neanderthal DNA. Certain traits, from immune system defenses to skin adaptations, may come directly from them. Some scientists argue that if Neanderthals had not vanished, interbreeding would have continued until the line between them and us blurred completely. Perhaps today we would not speak of two species, but one hybrid humanity, richer for its diversity. Others imagine a starker picture, a divided planet, separate Neanderthal nations existing alongside ours, their politics and societies unfolding in parallel. Would wars have erupted, not between kingdoms of men, but between species of humans? History gives us little reason for optimism. Our record of dealing with those who are different is marked by conquest, assimilation, and destruction. The fate of indigenous peoples in the Americas, Australia, and beyond could foreshadow what Neanderthals might have endured. Yet there are tantalizing possibilities of cooperation. Neanderthals, with their robust builds and Ice Age endurance, might have excelled in environments where Homo sapiens faltered. Imagine polar research teams led by Neanderthal scientists, or Neanderthal astronauts designed to withstand radiation better than us, venturing further into space. Humanity, in its broadest sense, might have expanded faster, adapted wider, and dreamed bolder, not as a single species, but as a family of two. Still, unanswered questions loom. Why did they disappear in our world? Climate change, competition, disease, or simply the merging of populations? If we cannot agree on their extinction, how can we predict their survival? The truth is, archaeology leaves us with fragments: a tooth, a rib, a stone blade. From these shards, we reconstruct entire worlds, but much remains uncertain. This uncertainty is precisely why the question fascinates us. To imagine Neanderthals alive today is to imagine an alternate humanity, one where our uniqueness is challenged, our dominance questioned, our very definition of human expanded. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. If another kind of human walked the earth, would we embrace them as equals, or repeat the mistakes of history and push them aside? Perhaps the most haunting thought is this: for nearly 5,000 generations, Neanderthals did survive. They endured ice ages, predators, and famine. They thrived in a world more hostile than most of us can imagine. Their disappearance was not inevitable. It was fragile chance, a twist of fate. And if chance had tilted differently, they might still be here. The story of Neanderthals is not only about the past. It is also a mirror held up to us, a chance to reflect on what it means to be human and how fragile that identity truly is. If Neanderthals had survived into the modern world, our societies would have been forced to confront diversity at the deepest possible level. Not just differences in skin color, language, or culture, but differences written into the very bones of humanity. How would we have treated them? Would there be Neanderthal presidents, scientists, and poets honored alongside our own? Or would they be studied behind glass, reminders of how quickly otherness can become a prison? The lesson here is clear. Our species often draws sharp lines between us and them. History is filled with examples of how dangerous those lines become. The Neanderthals' imagined survival forces us to ask, could we ever truly accept another humanity as equal? Or are we doomed to repeat cycles of fear and exclusion, no matter how advanced we become? There is also a lesson of resilience. Neanderthals endured the Ice Age for hundreds of thousands of years. They hunted giant beasts, survived brutal winters, and adapted to landscapes that would terrify most of us today. Their survival story is one of strength, community, and adaptability. What if we looked at their endurance as an example for our future? In an age of climate change, pandemics, and new global challenges, perhaps the Neanderthal spirit, cooperation, toughness, care for the vulnerable is what we need most. And there's another reflection: identity. We like to imagine ourselves as unique, the one true form of intelligence on this planet. But the survival of Neanderthals would have shattered that illusion. We would have grown up knowing we were not alone. Perhaps we would have been humbler, less arrogant in our assumptions about dominance. Perhaps we would have learned earlier that intelligence is not singular, but diverse. Even now, Neanderthals live within us, not in the streets, but in our DNA. Every sneeze you fought off with the help of an ancient gene, every adaptation to cold winters carried in your blood is a whisper of their survival. They are gone, yet not gone. A hidden reminder that we are not the only story evolution ever told. So, when we ask, what if Neanderthals had survived, we are really asking something larger. What if we embraced every form of difference, not with fear, but with curiosity? What if we learned from the resilience of our prehistoric cousins instead of erasing them? What if, in imagining their presence today, we began to rethink how we treat each other? The past is not dead. It breathes in us, in the fragments of DNA we carry, and in the lessons we choose to remember. And if we listen closely, perhaps the Neanderthals are still whispering, not just about what was lost, but about what could still be found.
So, what if Neanderthals had survived into the modern world? The evidence tells us they were not brutish cavemen, but resilient, intelligent, and social beings. They mastered fire, crafted tools, painted caves, and perhaps even mourned their dead. They were different from us, yes, but not so different that we cannot see ourselves in their eyes. Had they lived alongside us, history would not be the story of one humanity, but of two peoples, sharing the earth, shaping civilizations in parallel. Perhaps they would have become our allies, our rivals, or even our equals in science, art, and exploration. Perhaps they would have reminded us that humanity is not one path, but many branches. And yet their survival is not just a matter of speculation. In a way, they do survive. Inside us. Their DNA flows in our blood. Their legacy strengthens our immune systems, adapts us to climates, and whispers from the deep past. We are their children, as much as we are the children of Homo sapiens. The question remains, if another humanity had walked beside us, would we have treated them with dignity? Or would we have repeated the same mistakes we commit against each other, drawing lines, creating divisions, fearing what is different?
The mystery of the Neanderthals is not only about the bones in caves or the tools in the soil. It is about us, about how we see difference, how we imagine belonging, and how we understand our place in the long, winding story of evolution.